Pokrovsk, it unfolds in the air, it unfolds at sea. The air domain, which is what we're talking about with the Russian strikes last night, Ukraine has a good capability to destroy drones and missiles. They routinely destroy the majority of what Russia launches. But first of all, when you launch over 400 drones, even if you destroy the vast majority of them, dozens will still get through. So it's problematic. But Ukraine also has an offensive air capability, which they demonstrated last night by hitting the Russian oil export terminal in Novorossiysk, which is one of the largest export terminals Russia has. It accounts for about 2% of global oil trade. So hitting Novorossiysk was a strategic strike on the Russian economy. The difference here is Ukraine is hitting military targets or targets that are directly related to Russia's ability to make war. Russia is hitting things like apartment buildings, markets, hospitals, and schools, essentially just trying to terrorize the Ukrainian population.
What about manpower when it comes to Ukrainian forces? I recall being there last year asking President Zelensky about that issue. They were just lowering the draft age then from 27 to 25. Is that manpower an issue, and is it showing up on the battlefield?
It's the biggest issue. Manpower is Ukraine's biggest issue. And increasingly, both Ukrainians and foreign analysts who are looking at the war are coming to the conclusion that Ukraine will probably have to lower the involuntary draft age below 25. As you mentioned, it was 27 at the start of the war, lowered to 25. It probably needs to go lower because, look, there are places on the front lines around Pokrovsk where 1,000 yards of frontage is covered by 4 to 7 Ukrainian soldiers. Just for perspective and comparison, by U.S. Army doctrine, a U.S. infantry company, which is about 150 people, would normally be responsible for 500 to 800 meters of frontage. And so in Ukraine, in places along the line, you've got 4 to 7 people responsible for more frontage than an entire U.S. infantry company would normally be responsible for. It's a huge problem. Ukraine has been able to make up for some of it by the use of drones and artillery, especially drones, to cover parts of the front line where their manpower is very thin. But as the winter sets in, the weather gets worse, the clouds roll in, it's rainy, it's foggy, drones are less effective. And that's part of the reason the Russians were able to infiltrate Ukrainian lines around Pokrovsk.
Colonel, I've got less than a minute left, but I have to ask you, we showed that video of Russian forces rolling into Pokrovsk on motorcycles in kind of a ragtag fashion. What do you take away from that, what it says about the Russian forces, and also why this city and the strategic gains Russia has made?
Yeah, I wouldn't call them strategic. I would call them operational, right? And maybe we're splitting hairs here, but in the military, we talk about tactical, operational, and strategic levels of war and effects. It's more than tactical because Pokrovsk is astride, it sits astride a major road and a major rail line. And so it is operationally significant, but the Ukrainians, as long as they don't get cut off, as long as their pocket Pokrovsk is not surrounded and they're able to withdraw into a border, they'll preserve the integrity of their lines. The Russians have not shown an ability to exploit any of these breakthroughs they make. And these breakthroughs are really infiltrations, right? The Ukrainian lines are not being severed or broken. Russians are getting 2, 3, 4 people behind the lines and then following that up with larger forces, as you saw in the video with the motorcycles, the dune buggies, and the four-wheelers, the other vehicles. But both sides are doing because large military vehicles don't survive long on this battlefield.
That is retired Colonel Robert Hamilton joining us tonight. Colonel, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you.